Well, we're still here in the delightful garden in Melbourne. It's getting colder, it's getting greyer, and all the masks are on today. But the government did release its budget estimates today and its growth estimates. So we're interested in the growth estimates to begin with, and they're expecting that growth in 2021 will be minus 2.5%, and we're expecting minus 2%. So we're pretty much in line with their overall growth number. They've got a different view about the mix between consumption and business investment. They're more pessimistic about business investment than we are, but we're more pessimistic about consumption. But broadly, at this stage of predicting the economy, given so much uncertainty, it's better to think about the big number than to try and get down into too much detail on this. The most important factor in these forecasts, of course, is the assumption about the pace of the opening up of the economy. And I have to say that the government's forecasts are what I would call the most optimistic that you can have. And that is that there are no setbacks, there are no second waves, Victoria reopens in mid-August, and by the December quarter, the 4 square metre rule is in place, but that is really the only main restriction apart from overseas borders. The assumption around the overseas borders is that from the beginning of next year, international travel will be allowed to occur as long as foreign visitors exercise the 2-week quarantine guideline. So that's as optimistic as you can get, and yet still they've only assumed 1% employment growth. We think employment growth will be more like 4%. Because we've got the economy growing through that year, that's through the year as against the year average numbers of more than 5%. And we think 4% employment growth looks about right. What about the budget numbers? Well, the budget forecast of $185 billion for 2021 and $85 billion for 1920, those numbers are a bit less than our own numbers. And I know that sounds a bit strange because we've got stronger growth, stronger employment growth, and yet a bigger deficit. But of course, looking into our black box relative to the government's black box is almost an impossible task. We'll have to wait and see how those numbers evolve over the course of the next 12 months. The policy assumptions within the budget are very limited. They've extended the time that you can draw down the extra $10,000 in superannuation, allowing that to happen in the December quarter as well as the September quarter. And that's about it for the major new policy. Obviously, we're expecting much more new policy in the budget on October 6. I think that assumption around international travel is important because despite the fact that they're assuming that foreign visitors can come to Australia after they do their quarantine, 2-week quarantine, they're still assuming an 85% fall in net migration this year relative to 2018-19. And even if you put all the new numbers, the 31,000 compared to about 240,000 in 18-19, even if you put all of them into the second half of this year, that's still a 75% fall in expected migration. I think the government can do better than that. I think we've got to understand that foreign students, who represent more than half of net migration now, need to be looked after, that we need to strike a policy whereby we can get more of them coming back into the country. So I'm hopeful that we will see a much larger increase in foreign visitors next year than is indicated by those numbers. So looking forward to the budget, we expect that our number of $210 billion will lift to about $240 billion in the budget deficit to be announced on October 6. We're expecting to see an extension of JobKeeper to cover the final quarter of this year. That'll cost about $4 billion. And an extension of JobSeeker for the second half of this year, that is the March and June quarters, that'll cost about $11 billion. We're also expecting to see the legislated tax cuts that are expected to come down in July 2022 to be brought forward to the October 6 budget. That'll cost about $14 billion a year. And I think there'll be other infrastructure initiatives and some one-off payments to support the economy. So whereas the 185 billion I think is light, on a like-for-like basis, we expected the number to be about 210 billion, and that's on the assumption of 4% employment growth. The final number I think will be up well above that 185 billion by the time we come to budget night. Thank you.